Emily sat by her bedroom window, staring at the gray sky. The raindrops tapped against the glass, matching the heaviness in her heart. Just a week ago, her grandmother had been here, sitting in her favorite chair, telling stories and laughing. Now, the chair was empty, and so was Emily's heart. She hugged her knees and buried her face in them. "I miss you, Grandma," she whispered. Her grandmother had always been there, baking cookies, knitting scarves, and telling her bedtime stories. She had the warmest hugs and the softest voice. But now, she was gone, and nothing felt the same. At school, Emily couldn't concentrate. The words in her textbooks blurred together. At lunchtime, she sat alone, picking at her food. Her friends talked and laughed, but she felt like she was in a different world, a world without color or joy. At home, her parents tried to cheer her up. "Do you want to watch a movie, sweetie?" her mom asked. Emily shook her head. "How about we go for ice cream?" her dad suggested, but Emily just sighed. Nothing seemed fun anymore. One evening, she walked into her grandmother's old room. The scent of lavender still filled the air. Emily sat on the bed and picked up a small, knitted pillow. It was one of the last things her grandmother had made. Hugging it tightly, she closed her eyes, wishing she could hear her grandmother's voice just one more time. The world felt cold and empty without her, and Emily didn't know if she would ever feel happy again. One afternoon, Emily sat on the couch, staring at the television without really watching it. Her father was reading a newspaper, and her mother was folding laundry. But the house felt too quiet. It had been this way ever since Grandma passed away. The house used to be full of warmth. Grandma's laughter, the smell of fresh cookies, and the soft hum of her favorite songs. Now, everything felt empty. Emily's mother walked into the living room carrying a wooden box. It was old, with tiny carvings of flowers on the lid. She placed it gently on the coffee table in front of Emily. "This belonged to Grandma," her mother said softly. "I thought you might like to have it." Emily hesitated, her fingers hovering over the smooth surface of the box. She wasn't sure if opening it would make her feel better or worse. Slowly, she lifted the lid, and the familiar scent of lavender filled the air. Inside, there were neatly folded letters, black and white photographs, and a small leather-bound diary. She picked up a photograph on top of the pile. It was a picture of her grandmother as a young woman, standing in a garden with a wide, joyful smile. Emily had never seen her looking so young before. She traced the edges of the picture with her finger. "She loved that garden," her mother said, sitting beside her. "She used to spend hours planting flowers and talking to them like they were her friends." Emily smiled a little, imagining her grandmother chatting with roses and daisies. She reached for the diary next. The cover was slightly worn, and the pages had a soft yellow tint. As she flipped through it, she found an entry from many years ago, written in her grandmother's neat, flowing handwriting. "Today, little Emily helped me bake cookies for the first time. She got flour everywhere, even in her hair. We laughed so much. I hope she always remembers that happiness is in the little moments." Tears welled up in Emily's eyes, but this time, they weren't just from sadness. She could almost hear her grandmother's voice in the words. She remembered that day, how Grandma had let her shape the dough into funny animal shapes, and how they had giggled when the cookies came out looking a little strange. She read more entries, each one filled with love and memories. There were notes about the times they had spent together, summer picnics, bedtime stories, and even the time they had tried to paint the fence but ended up painting each other instead. Emily held the diary close to her chest. She wasn't alone. Grandma might not be here, but her love was still with her, in every word, in every memory. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt a little lighter. The next morning, Emily walked to school with the diary in her backpack. She had read it again before bed, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she dreamed of her grandmother's warm hugs and the scent of freshly baked cookies. But school still felt the same. Dull, empty, and tiring. She sat at her usual desk, staring at the whiteboard as the teacher wrote out math problems. "All right, class," Miss Carter announced. "We have a new student joining us today. Please welcome Jack." Emily looked up as a boy with dark brown hair and a slightly nervous smile walked in. He wore a blue hoodie and held his backpack straps tightly, like he wasn't sure if he wanted to be here. Jack sat down in the empty seat next to Emily. She glanced at him, but he kept his eyes on his notebook, tapping his pencil absent-mindedly. At lunch, Emily found her usual quiet corner in the cafeteria. She wasn't in the mood to chat with her classmates. She opened her lunchbox and sighed at the sight of a peanut butter sandwich. Grandma used to pack her lunch, always adding a little surprise, an extra cookie, a funny note, or a small drawing. Now, lunchtime just reminded her of what was missing. "Is this seat taken?" a voice asked. Emily looked up to see Jack standing there, holding a tray with a sandwich and an apple. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, you can sit here." Jack sat down, unwrapping his sandwich. For a moment, they ate in silence. "I hate peanut butter," he muttered suddenly. Emily blinked, then let out a small laugh. "Me too." Jack looked at her with surprise, then grinned. "Really? Everyone seems to love it." Emily shrugged. "My grandma used to make me different sandwiches. Egg salad, turkey, even grilled cheese. Now, it's just peanut butter every day." Jack's smile faded a little. He stared at his sandwich for a moment before saying, "My grandpa used to make me pancakes on weekends. He always made them in silly shapes. Dinosaurs, spaceships, even a pancake that was supposed to be my face." He chuckled, but his voice was quieter. "He passed away a few months ago." Emily felt a small jolt in her chest. "I lost my grandma recently," she admitted. "It still feels strange, like something is missing." Jack nodded. "Yeah, like a piece of your world is just gone." For the first time, Emily felt like someone truly understood. She had talked to her parents, her teachers, even her friends, but no one seemed to really know what it felt like. But Jack did. They sat in silence for a moment, then Jack pulled a small notebook from his bag. "I write letters to my grandpa," he said. "I know he won't read them, but it helps." Emily thought about the diary in her backpack. "My grandma wrote about me in her journal," she said. "It makes me feel close to her." Jack smiled. "Maybe I should start a journal too." Emily nodded. "Maybe I should write letters." For the rest of lunch, they talked about their grandparents, about funny stories, favorite foods, and things they missed. And as the bell rang, Emily realized something. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel completely alone. A week after their first conversation, Emily and Jack had become inseparable. They walked to class together, shared lunch, and talked about their grandparents every day. Emily found that talking about her grandmother didn't hurt as much anymore. Instead, it made her smile. One afternoon, as they sat under a tree in the schoolyard, Jack picked up a fallen leaf and twirled it between his fingers. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "my grandpa used to say that flowers never really die. Even when they wither, their seeds create new life." Emily looked at him, intrigued. "My grandma loved flowers," she said. She had a garden filled with roses, daisies, and lavender. She always said that flowers make people happy. Jack grinned. Maybe we should plan a garden for them, a place to remember them. Emily's heart warmed at the idea. That's a great idea, but where? Jack thought for a moment, then pointed toward an empty patch of land near the school fence. That spot gets a lot of sunlight. Maybe we can ask Miss Carter if we can use it. The next day, they nervously approached their teacher. Miss Carter listened to their idea, her eyes soft with understanding. I think that's a wonderful idea, she said. Gardening is a beautiful way to remember someone. You can use the school's tools, and I'll help you get some seeds. Excited, Emily and Jack spent the next few days planning their garden. They researched flowers, made sketches, and even asked their classmates if they wanted to help. To their surprise, many students were interested. Some had also lost grandparents. Others simply loved flowers. On Saturday morning, they met at the schoolyard with small shovels, watering cans, and packets of seeds. Jack's mom brought a bag of soil, and Emily's dad helped dig the first hole. This spot is for Grandma's lavender, Emily said, carefully placing the seeds into the earth. She smiled, remembering the scent that always clung to her grandmother's clothes. Jack planted marigolds for his grandpa. He always said they were the sunniest flowers, he explained. Their friends planted tulips, sunflowers, and daisies. Some students brought little wooden signs with names written on them. Names of family members they had lost, names of pets, even names of favorite storybook characters who had inspired them. For the next few weeks, Emily and Jack took care of the garden together. They watered the plants, removed weeds, and watched eagerly as tiny green sprouts pushed through the soil. One afternoon, as Emily sprinkled water over the new buds, she realized something. She felt lighter. The sadness was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. Instead, she felt proud. Proud that she and Jack had created something beautiful out of their grief. Jack seemed to feel the same way. He crouched down, touching the leaves of a young marigold plant. I think Grandpa would have liked this, he said with a smile. Emily nodded. And Grandma would have loved it. They sat there for a while, watching the gentle sway of the plants in the wind. The garden was small, but it was full of life. And just like the flowers, Emily and Jack were growing too, stronger, brighter, and full of new hope. One bright morning, Emily walked to the school garden with Jack. The air smelled fresh, and the sun cast a golden glow over the little patch of flowers they had planted. The lavender had finally bloomed, filling the air with its soft, calming scent. The marigolds stood tall, their bright orange petals reaching toward the sky. The garden was alive, full of color, just like the memories of their loved ones. Emily knelt beside the lavender and ran her fingers gently over the tiny purple blossoms. Grandma would have loved this, she said with a smile. Jack nodded, sitting beside her. Yeah, I think they'd both be proud of us. For the first time in weeks, Emily felt truly at peace. The sadness was still there, but it no longer felt like a heavy cloud over her heart. Instead, it was a quiet ache, a reminder of how much she had loved her grandmother. And love, she realized, didn't disappear. It stayed in memories, in laughter, in the little things, like the smell of lavender on a warm morning. That evening, she sat on her bed with her grandmother's diary. She hadn't opened it in a few days, but tonight she wanted to. Flipping through the pages, she stopped at an entry written years ago. Life is like a garden. Some days it rains, some days the sun shines, but if you take care of it with love, something beautiful will always grow. Emily smiled, running her fingers over the words. Grandma had always believed in finding beauty, even in the hardest moments. Taking out a notebook, she began to write her first letter to her grandmother. Dear Grandma, today I saw the lavender bloom. It reminded me of you. I still miss you, but I know you're with me in so many ways. And I promise to keep finding joy, just like you taught me. She closed the notebook, hugging it to her chest. The pain of losing her grandmother would never completely go away, but now it didn't feel like something to fear. It was simply a part of love, a part of life. And as she lay down that night, she no longer felt lost in the dark. There was light again, warm and gentle, shining through the memories she would carry forever.